Digital 410 Media proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts, Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Dennis Blocker.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II-based podcast, and we're back live. Got the whole crew together, plus one more. Joining us from Texas, as always, Mr. Jeff Copsetta. Jeff, how you doing tonight, sir?
Outstanding. I can't wait to introduce our guest. We've been trying to work on this for a few weeks now. So I think the listeners are in for a good treat tonight.
And if I ever get around to editing the video, joining us from the bright side of the moon, Mr. Dennis Blocker. Dennis, how you doing tonight, sir?
Doing very well. It's good to be here. The rads are a little high on this end, but
oh, look, you make some Fallout references. Go ahead, Jeff, take it away.
Joining us for this episode of What's the Scuttlebutt has become a real good buddy of ours and just an unbelievable historian. He's a current airman, service member, and we met, a year or two ago at an event. And, you know, like the people in this hobby, they just tend to stay in touch because we all have a common interest. And, you know, it's a pretty small cadre of people that do reenacting and try to keep World War II history alive. So I'm so happy that Mr. Gerald Caballero, otherwise known as Cowboy, is joining us tonight to talk his reenactment, some of his experiences, some of the things that he's collected, because he's everywhere and all over. He's reenacted in several states and several countries. So really, really excited to hear more about Cowboy tonight. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to What's the Scuttlebutt, buddy.
Thanks a lot for having me over. I'm really excited to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to interact and be able to expand a little bit of my social media presence, and it's definitely a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking about social media, we're going to definitely talk about that before the end of the show with your new YouTube channel and everything that you've got going on, and some of the new things that you've acquired. But first, if you could, I mean, you know, when we first talked, I think we had a table display like right next to each other.
Yes, that's correct.
Down there at Stinson Army Airfield in San Antonio, and you were just showing me some amazing pictures of some of the reenacting you did overseas, and it was really intriguing. And if you don't mind sharing maybe how you got into the hobby, and why you chose to reenact some of those things that you did, of course, not always on the American side, I guess I should say.
Yes, that's correct. All right, before I get started, I got a disclaimer that I got to go through. Like you said, I'm an active duty airman, so I'd like to clarify that at this time, basically everything that you hear from me to the end of this podcast is strictly my own personal opinion. It does not represent the policies, support, or sponsorship in any shape, way, or form for the United States government, the Department of Defense, or the Department of the Air Force. Also, like you said, I tend to be a reenactor that fulfill different countries. So strictly my interest in all this is a military historian perspective. It's not ideological, not racially biased, or any kind of other negative, thought process associated with that. Strictly for the love of the hobby and for enjoying, different perspective from World War II. Well, that out of the way, I guess we'll go with how I got started on this. So I want to say I was probably about 8 years old, and my dad had resumed a relationship with his half brother. They grew up apart. They have been separated through living in the same town, but in different households and not really having the opportunity to know each other. And then they kind of picked up their relationship in their 30s. So my uncle invited me over with my dad. And I remember entering to that living room for the first time in my life, and then watching a picture of a gentleman in uniform sitting there in the middle of the living room. The picture for me was very moving, and I immediately got drawn up into the picture. And when I asked my father, like, who's the guy in the picture, he told me, well, that's your grandfather. And of course, honestly, at that point, I have not even internalized that I had a grandfather. Unfortunately, he died in 1967, so I didn't get to meet him or have any interaction with that side of the family. So immediately after I heard those words, it's like my whole chest got pumped up, and I basically felt special, like like wow. And why is he in uniform? What's he doing? Oh, he was in World War II. And I kind of took the liberty. I'm not really sure if you can see it with the lighting, but I decided to bring up the picture to kind of show you guys what I'm talking about. So this is Staff Sergeant Gerardo Caballero Lopez. A picture was taken in 1943, and at the time he was stationed on in the Panama Canal Zone, operating an anti-aircraft artillery unit or anti-aircraft artillery unit as a radio operator. Again, this all kind of research came down later in life when I became more of an adult and I started to get more interested in his service. Um, Pretty much that kind of steered me in the direction of military service. Immediately, I joined the Silver Patrol and I started learning a little bit of what it was to kind of be an airman and getting involved with that type of program. I spent about 8 years. From then, I went to the Army ROTC and I did 2 years to learning how to be an infantry officer, which kind of solidified a little bit of that interest in World War II tactics and from the uniform perspective and everything that has to do with that. Later on, I ended up joining the Air Force. I became an Air Force pilot, went on pilot training in Del Rio, Texas, not very far away from here, where I'm stationed now. And my first assignment was basically the E8 Joint Stars, which is an air-to-ground platform that was basically designed with the intent of explicitly supporting the Army role. So that kind of kept that relationship with, again, ground forces kind of alive. One day I walked up into my boss office, and he was also a reenactor, and we had no idea, right? Because you tend to focus in your personal career, right? And these are all hobbies that a lot of times they don't come into play in your normal service life. And I picked it up real quick because he had a bunch of pictures that he had gone to Reading, Pennsylvania, and then basically done the Bulge as a Army airborne, 506 Easy Company, parachute infantry regiment guy. So he had some really amazing pictures with him in uniform. And immediately it captured my interest into, wow, that's something you can actually go do. And I had no idea that there's people that, participate in this kind of hobby and this kind of engagement. And so it immediately intrigued my curiosity. So at the time he was reenacting with groups of Florida. So he went ahead and basically gave me some contacts. I started interacting with different units. I am
What units were you?
that,
Sorry to interrupt, but what units
yeah.
out of Florida were you working with?
Well, initially it was a 352nd Infantry Regiment, a very small outfit. One of the things that it's how can I say interested, the German side is a lot smaller than the Allied side.
Yeah.
So there's some differences that I'll cover in a moment. But yeah, out of all the people that I sent emails to, I got replies back with like, oh, you got to meet all these requirements, and we have all this like vetting process to join us. And then the German guy says, oh, you want to come over? Come over here. We're happy to have you. Again, a lot of it had to do with the perspective of how sometimes the negative aspect of this hobby from the German side doesn't carry it out to something that people want to be attached to or associated with. So I can't remember specifically what allied units I actually interacted at the same time, but it quickly became apparent to me that coming in from somebody that has a little bit more military experience than they do, that it was very hierarchy orientated, and at the same time, some of the people that were running these outfits, their impression of how does a military unit kind of works is, in my opinion, wasn't really that accurate. Uh, and it kind of left me with a bit of a bad flavor from the get-go. At the same time, the Germans were extremely welcoming, and that's kind of how I end up a little bit more into that particular unit. Seemed like everybody was interested in teaching me and showing me. Also, if you think about it from the perspective of how quickly you can train somebody into act like an American airman when it's the same culture, it's a lot easier to do than developing somebody from another country. There's a language barrier that you got to work through. There's a cultural development that you got to learn to portray, to try to make you, as accurate as possible in your representation. That created some, I guess, barriers of entry that a lot of people are not necessarily willing to go through. And when you actually show the interest, people are a lot more welcoming to you. So yeah, the first unit that I did was a Panzer Jaeger unit, which is basically a tank hunter. Guys were eager to lend me uniforms, to lend me weapons, to lend me anything that that came in to allow you to like get interested and get a flavor for the hobby. And I think my first event was a tactical event in Ocala, Florida, and they brought in a couple of American tanks, and so the whole process of trying to gear up and sneak up to try to go take out a tank, I found it very interesting from the tactical perspective, and having a certain basic knowledge, from my Army ROTC days on how to set up ambushes and how to do things like that. It made it really rewarding to be able to get involved with that. And so I quickly got some recognition, and then it was interesting because they asked me, hey, we got this magnetic mine. We want you to run over to this tank and go attach it to. And the first thought that came to my mind was my commander getting notified that I got crushed by a tank from a simulated training event. So I'm like, I tell you what, I think I'm going to pass on that. I like where you guys are going to, but why don't you pick him instead of me? Because it's a little safer for my longevity. So I end up kind of getting attached to the unit, but then I decided to kind of do my own thing. And the idea is that I had the interest of perceiving World War II from all different perspectives. So to me, it was easier to be a freelancer, if you may, than being attached to a particular unit. So I ended up getting a variety of uniforms from Allies, British, American, German, right? And it was interesting because I'll be in one event for one day playing with one team, and then the next day they found me in the battlefield in the opposing line, and everybody's like confused, like, hey, what happened? How did you switch sides? And all this other stuff. They end up calling me the cross-dresser when it came down to reenacting.
Well, I've been kind of nomad myself for about 4 or 5 years, because when I first started here in Florida, I fell in with the 1st Infantry. But then John left to go work with World War II Armor. And so Jerry and I were just kind of surfing around. But yeah, I'm the same way. And plus, I kind of found it annoying when I was working with another group. They're like trying to control what events people could go to. It's like, I paid for all this crap. I want to get all the use out of it I can. I want to go to whatever events I want. And so I literally just, if I follow the group, I'll literally 3 days in advance just sew the damn patch on my shirt or get a second shirt. But yeah, I kind of like the nomad thing.
Yeah, so again, I did that nomadic style for a while, and I figured the easiest way to do that was to not have to worry about showing uniforms. That's where the camel patterns kind of came in, easy. You will just throw a smock in whatever, tunic you had and throw some camouflage in your helmet and go to town, right? So I started getting more interested into the sniper perspective. Really, really cool when you're like sitting on a part of the battlefield observing everything through a rifle scope. And so you have that narrow field of view, which basically gives you a lot more of an immersion feeling to it. So I really enjoy that. And so I started playing around, like I said, showing in different events. And I played a little bit, like one event has the British paratrooper sniper type, and then I'll roll over and do a German side at the end of the day. And like I said, I got to meet a lot of interesting people and get different perspective from it. And I found that pretty rewarding. Unfortunately, military service and reenacting are not two things that go very well together because, a lot of it is networking, right? You got to know the people, you got to start the relationships, and then somebody comes in and goes, okay, you got orders, you're moving to this other location, and it's like press the reset button, and you find yourself in another part of the country trying to keep the hobby alive. And you start, especially early, was difficult because the internet wasn't as accessible, and finding units or like-minded people that like to do this was more and more difficult. But somehow I ended up getting around, circling the wagons to more or less the same audience. A lot of the time I spent between Texas and Oklahoma, which made it somewhat easier. So then I got stationed in Enid, Oklahoma. And from there, I came across another unit that basically did also German infantry. And these were like, the people I got the closest with. I got a friend of mine that had a German motorcycle, and we did a lot of like interesting impressions. Like, for example, we went out to Ruidosa, New Mexico, went up to another event that they had. So I can't remember what its name, but it was well known. This thing was massive, right? It had a huge amount of land. associated with the event, and up there in Ruidosa, New Mexico. And with the problem with the sniper experience, if you may, is that you don't get to touch people with your rifle like you would in real life, right? So it's that balance between trying to hide and sneak up, and at the same time you fire when everybody else starts shooting, and then nobody knows you're there, so nobody takes your hits.
Yeah.
So at the tactical level, seems very silly, right? But that event was kind of cool because it was wide open, and it allowed us to set up ambushes or put in ridge lines where we can actually see people walking down the path and then engage them from that point on. Remember this particular occasion, my buddy and I, his name was CJ, were perched basically there watching this path below, and I come out with the full up smoke and everything, completely camo and branches everywhere, right? And I approached the ridge line, present the rifle, and quickly, very slowly started to reverse my steps back into the little hole that I was. And CJ goes like, "What's going on? What happened?" He's like, "It's not the Americans. It's a bear." So we basically came head to head with a bear, which we happened to be kind of hunting from a higher elevation, so he never picked up our scents. Thank God. But again, that would have been an interesting thing. I watched people jump into foxholes and basically jump out because there was a snake inside the same foxhole that they had, they have dug out before.
I've gotten
Yeah.
I've gotten so lucky down here in Florida. I've yet to deal with any wildlife. I did get the feeling I was being stalked by a panther one time, so I just fixed my bayonet. It was nighttime. I was walking back to my camp, but no wildlife. Isn't it crazy? Public events are one thing, but when you're actually out on a bunch of property and a tactical, and you've been humping around for a few hours, and enough time's gone by where you can kind of get into that method actor sense. I've done it a few times where I will flank the enemy, or I'll get myself in position, lay down, get up underneath a log. The whole thing's make believe. We're out there shooting blanks, but the adrenaline and anxiety you get when you're nestled down and you hear people walking up behind you and then past you, and then you're just waiting for them to get about 20 yards, and you jump up and start squeezing off rounds.
Yeah.
It's crazy how if you allow yourself to get into it, you'll get the nervous twitches and stuff, and it's hard to explain because once again it's make believe. But to that point, we've also heard people like Tom Hanks say one of the hardest roles he ever played was Saving Private Ryan because he's playing this make believe for so long. And to that point, and I'm sure you got the experience when you were playing with the tank. I was at an event where I was doing that, and I could feel the ground rumbling from the Sherman tank rolling up behind me from about 20 yards. And when you're laying there and you just see the ground shaking, or when they're shooting the cannons and you're just looking at the sand bouncing off your pant leg, yeah, they're blanks, but it's definitely interesting to experience, to see, to feel the environment shaking and seeing the impact of just the concussion of the blanks flying over your head.
Absolutely. And sometimes people get in the role and they have a hard time disassociating reality to what's actually happening. So that same event that I was talking about, that we had the encounter with the bear, they quickly realized that they kind of messed up because it was the area that they set up for the tactical was too big, and people were barely running into each other. So you walk around for hours and you don't find anything, and eventually you get bored and you pack up and leave. And so they decided to conceal the event and make it more pack. So they started using this POW barracks that they basically had set up in there, where German soldiers have been, in captivity after they got captured by the Allies. And they set that up as an objective, and then they started all these units converging into this building. Didn't end up well. Unfortunately, somebody comes around the corner with a 45 and he shoots at somebody close range, upsets the person.
Yep.
The person turns the MP40 and goes full out on him. And before you realize, people are throwing helmets at each other. And this particular helmet cut this guy lip like right through clean, steel pot. And it ended up in a brawl pretty quickly compared to, what the intent of the event was. Like I said, sometimes people just can't differentiate that. But what I found hard was that you go to an area and they go, okay, so this is the Eastern Front, right?
Yep.
And then you walk into a stop sign, right? And then you try to put yourself in that immersion mode, and that illusion is quickly broken as soon as you find something that brings you back to the 21st century that it brings you back to reality. So I participated in certain events, and then I also did a lot of, since I'm in the Air Force, I did a lot of Army Air Corps stuff. I went through a couple of events and ballroom dances and everything that people kind of like they do with Jeff. They'll have me all go over and set up a display, and interestingly enough, so there's a hierarchy in the Air Force, of course, and so you have, like, for example, your wing commander is the full colonel, right, and he's used to walking over to one of these like charity dances or whatever and be like the star of the night, right? And then you show up in your 8 Air Force, Class A tunic, has a lieutenant or a captain, with your wife dressed up in a 1940s outfit, and you steal a shirt from the colonel right underneath his underneath his robe, basically, because everybody's like all around you and everything. So I really enjoy that. On that particular event, I got to meet Jack McNeese, which again, it's very interesting figure, and hearing his stories from him directly with the Filthy 13 and everything else. It was quite an amazing evening. A lot of the proceedings went to charity for veterans and things like that. So it was a really rewarding event to participate. Um, then after that, I kind of finished my tour in it, and I got extremely blessed when the Air Force goes, "Hey, we got news to you," and I got sent to Europe. So I got deployed, or not deployed, I'm sorry, I got a permanent change of station to Germany. That, to me, having experienced a little bit of that German reenactor, it was I don't know, a bunch of like mixed feelings going into it. One of the things that I did is I took all my gear, thinking that, oh, this is Europe, you can't bring any of that stuff back there. People are gonna go nuts with it, and I locked everything up in the storage and left it behind. And went up there as any other American, airman deploying or forward moving to Europe. And about 6 months into it, I realized what a mistake it was, because trust me, reenacting there, it's out of control. There's groups in Belgium that live this all year long. Every Saturday, they have some sort of event going on, right? But it takes you to be able to know people to get into that crowd, right? And at the time, there was a big event that they do around the Battle of the Bulge. They usually invite Americans, active duty airmen, to go out there and participate. And most people know the event has the walk, right? So there's a very long march that you go to. And what they do is, like, every so many kilometers, they actually set up some sort of battle scene to try to give sense to the walk you're doing. For example, they can have an aid station. You go over there, you find a command section somewhere else, and a communication tent or something like that. And so it kind of gives you an experience. And most Americans know of that. They walk the route, they finish the route, get in a car, and go home. They don't quite know that there's a lot more thing what meets the eye. Well, so I got invited to this other event in Belgium that had to do with a B-17 crash cycle. The B-17 aircraft was called the Joker. And the people of this town in Belgium, they're so appreciative from the sacrifices these airmen did during World War II, that they have a really nice monument there with the propeller of a B-17 sticking up in there, in this mount. And so every year they do an anniversary. So they invited us over. Unfortunately, a lot of times you'll see that when the military, like public affairs section, they interact with the local community, the message kind of gets confused sometimes in terms of what you're really going for. So this bunch of Americans show up on there like we're going on a field trip. And then we arrive and we realize that it's a memorial ceremony and that it's very solemn, and we're all kind of like in shorts and t-shirts and wondering, like, how did it go wrong with the communication? So we made a point out of it, and we figured the next year we're going to make it a lot better. And of course, we show up with a bus full of active duty airmen, all wearing blues and everything. And I decided to give it my own little spin, and I got my old Air Force impression that I quickly picked up when I was there from different vendors in Europe, and I show up as a B-17 crewman with some of the equipment that I was able to find and everything. And man, it was such a rewarding experience. I got pictures with children surround me. I got all kinds of community engagement, and it's something that they never seen in the years before, and it really established a huge amount of shine to the event. It kind of went something like this, right? The organizers were thanking the mayor of the city. They were thanking, the American colonel that was in charge of the whole brigade, and that's basically me at the end of it, at the start of the show. simply because I brought the spirit of the Joker crew over to that event, and
Wow, that's awesome.
really, really cool. But it not only that, it gave me a lot of contacts in the community, which is what I was needing for. And so I got an invitation to go participate in the Bulge. I asked around; everybody knew about what the Bulge was about, but I did my best to portray American on this particular setup. A lot of it because I was concerned, because at the time I was stationed on a German base. I had a German commander, and we all know how politically sensitive all this could be. The last thing I want to do was screw it up and upset people and get kicked out of the assignment and sent back to America before it was my time. So I was really being careful with this, and so I reached out to an army garrison that was in Holland, but pretty close to our base and the German side, and they put me in contact with this other person, and this other person turned out to be a German reenacting unit because somebody messed up the emails, and I end up on the German side again. So I was like, okay, well, might as well do it. Why not, right? I also had the problem that because I left most of my gear in America, I had to start from scratch, financially speaking, and we all know how expensive that could be.
Well, I was going to say,
So,
nothing's heavier than wool and canvas, so you're kind of at this realm of, is it cheaper to ship all my crap from overseas or buy it here, which leads to my next question. Over in Europe, are there more reenacting vendors compared to what we have here stateside?
oh yes, definitely so. But again, you need to know where to find those events and how to get exposed to it. But the problem is that anything that it was American driven, how much you think is a fair price for like an M1 steel pot helmet?
Nowadays?
Yeah.
Talking front seam, swivel bail, helmet without the liner.
Let's not get into this with just as basic as you can possibly make it.
Okay, front seam, swivel bail, no liner, $65.
Okay, great, awesome. You go try to buy that in Europe at the time. This is in 2012, 2014. Yeah. Oh, this is an American helmet. It's 900 euros.
Which is
and
what?
You go, what? No way I can afford to do that. And then again, the euros to dollars conversion doesn't help you either. But somehow you flip it around, and now you go try to find German stuff in Germany, where people are just getting rid of this stuff because they don't want anything to do with it.
Not to mention, we've all seen the post-war video where they're taking the helmets and turning them into colanders.
Oh yeah. So it's a lot easier to find gear, right? Because again, that's another problem. It's like you got a German unit in the States, right? Like you guys earlier were talking before the show started about Jeeps, right? Like how many Jeeps were made, right? So anybody can find a unit with a Jeep these days in America, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many Kubo wagons have you seen around?
You mean a Volkswagen
right?
thing?
Yeah. So now in Europe, a lot of that stuff is more prevalent. So you have the ability to experience the German perspective in a way that you're not on foot. That it's not 3 Germans against 25 Americans,
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit more of an actual even playing field, and a little bit more with access to vehicles and everything. So in a way, I'm very happy that it kind of worked out that way. So moving forward, I went ahead and bought the basic kit that I could possibly do for the Bulge ride. Got my tunic, I got my wools, I got my boots, and then of course it's winter, Bulge, snowy type, so you want to have your winter camo. So I have my smock and everything. And it was interesting because I went to a German vendor and I picked up what I needed at the basic price. I ended up spending about maybe $400 total and everything. I don't have a weapon. That's another part of it because in German regulations I cannot have access to a weapon. But I'm sure you guys have probably seen the vendor Denix.
Yeah, I have a Thompson over
Spain
there.
That they sell some replica firearms. So those you can find in Europe pretty easily. So I went ahead and bought an MP44, replica that I can kind of walk around and blend in. Like I said, I was a little bit concerned. This is important part of the story, that I didn't want my face out there and I didn't want to be recognized to what I was doing. So I had that little feeling of doing something upload type of stuff. So I got my balaclava and basically the stuff just to stay as neutral and as gray man as possible. And so I made my contacts to email, had to translate a lot of French back to English until I finally was able to get an address to go to this event. Interestingly enough, the event was the same day that I have an Air Force function. That because of my leadership position, I couldn't afford not to go. So I'm sitting on this like dining out ceremony, just waiting it to be over so I can run to my event. So I finally finish, and it's about midnight when I arrive at the address that they gave me. Right. Oh, and of course, I'm not going to drive from Germany to Belgium into finally the Bulge area and the Ardennes dress up as a German soldier. Not a good idea. Right? So what I ended up doing is just show up in CVs, and I packed everything up on a German duffel bag, and off we go. And so I show up and I arrive in this village called Cobru. Um, the name kind of had a resemblance to me, but at the time it didn't make sense what it was until I started relooking at the original Call of Duty game. There was a battle between this village called Recogne and Cobru, where the Germans were fighting the Americans in this area. So I probably recognized the name from the map exposure from the first Call of Duty game that I played. So I show up, and immediately as I'm approaching this village, it starts to get a lot darker compared to the other villages around. Uh, Look like they have taken any kind of like modern life and literally swipe it out of the village completely. You couldn't see modern cars outside parked in front of the houses because they were all clean out. Some of the signs were covered that actually show you a little bit more modern stuff, and everything looked like it was back in 1944.
Nice.
Wow.
And so I approached this intersection where the address and the GPS they take me to do, and of course I'm like good cowboy. I'm riding around on my Ford Mustang convertible in Europe, right? Which I stick out like a sore thumb, and so I'm arriving at this checkpoint, and there's a whole sentry box in there with the German guard, right? And
Oh,
of
wow.
course he's ignoring my Mustang, and anything that has to do with the modern times is in full character, right? And I get up there and I lower my windshield, and he goes, "Guten Abend, Papier, bitte," which basically means, good evening, papers, please. And I go, "Well, I don't have any papers to give you." Say, "Somebody sent me this email to be here." And he goes, "Oh, you're the American." And I'm like, "Okay, yes, that's me." And he goes, "Well, why don't you go forward to this intersection, turn right by the Panther tank. There's a church." And he goes, "Right there's where you need to report to the captain." And
Oh man.
he just waits me off. And, in reenacting terms, you're so used to make believe, right? People talk about stuff that is not there all the time. Like one time they're talking about yeah, go to your bomber when your dress up was an aircraft. You go, yeah, I'm on my way or whatever, right? But there's not a bomber. It's another story to that. But in this particular case, again, I was just expecting a make believe world, right? So I'm like, yeah, sure.
Down
And
by the
everything is pitch
Panzer,
black.
gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. So I kept on going, right? And I find the church, and I get in the church, and of course, when I get in there, if I had to describe it, it's like I was teleported to Band of Brothers, and talking about that scene out there with the 8th station by the church and all that kind of stuff. And it's all kind of set up with the German side, and the lights are like all candle type lights, so it's a little darker. And there's this captain out there with basically his field uniform and his like trench jacket on. Basically, he's hunched over this table out there discussing battle plans in German with another guy. I'm like, whoa, that's interesting. Of course, as soon as I report in, they see me dressed up as a civilian, and they immediately reprimand me. They tell me to change into my uniform in German, and they told me to go report to this unit. So I go out there and change quickly back into my field gear, and they took me to a barn. This barn, I learned later that it was a really old barn that apparently was there in the 40s, and actually it housed German soldiers in the Battle of the Bulge.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, so you got that eerie feeling to it, right? When you walk in there, and of course I get introduced to the Unteroffizier, or the NCO, that was basically in charge of the Zug, is what the Germans call it for platoon. And so guy was totally intrigued because he could not understand why an American will choose to go ahead and play the other side. So, but anyway, we said our intros, and everybody who was coming into and approaching me was like, hey, there's this region of France called the Alsace region that is basically in between France and Germany. So a lot of the French people that lived there were somewhat ethnically Germans. So that kind of played out a little bit during World War II. So this particular group of French, they have a close connection with their German ethnicity. So so they can speak it, they can play the part very well from the perception of reality and relation to World War II. But they're all Frenchmen at the same time. So they're all excited that I was there, and everybody kept bringing me their wine from their region of France. Before you realize, it soon turned up into a party. Uh, and out of the blue, somebody moved some haystacks out of the way, and there's a piano in this barn. And they start playing songs like German songs like Lady Marlene on the piano. Somebody's recording them. They end up in YouTube, right? And I'm barely can speak the the lyrics to it. I'm like the drunken German on the background holding a bottle, basically, swinging side to side to try to blend in. Um, so, like I said, I already had an Air Force event that evening, so I was exhausted. I was tired, and I just crashed. Got my piece of hay together, and I just went to bed. And again, this is call it probably around 1:30 at night. About 3 a.m. in the morning, I woke up with Petrik's flashlight. This is the old boxy looking German flashlight that you see around. Somebody put that right on my face. And when I wake up, I am in total shock. I'm like, what the hell is this? And they literally put their hand on my mouth, and they make me shut up. And they go, shh, 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 go ahead, which basically is German for quiet. And I go, okay, my bad. And we get up, and we start assembling all the German troops on the outside of the street, all in complete quietness. Right? There's nobody joining commands. Everything is very tactical.
Hard to do in them boots.
Yep. But not everybody walks around with the clicks up. But my point is that everybody was tactically orientated as they would have been in the Battle of the Bulge. So next thing I know, we found ourselves walking through the Ardennes for 2 straight days.
Wow.
Hopping around into basically hopping fences from farmlands and all kinds of things. And this whole time we're actively trying to avoid detection from the Allied units that actually have set up checkpoints, and they had jeeps going around trying to find us. And I mean, we're walking around at, all like 30 in the morning, washing the snow, and then washing all this like steam that wakes up in the morning. I mean, that wasn't as realistic as you could possibly make it. I don't know what could be other than being there.
That's amazing.
Let me ask you a question real quick.
Sure. Of course.
Yeah,
So your whole reason for leaving your gear back in the United States was this concern about the possibility of not meeting local policies as far as symbols, badges, and things of that nature from the war. Were there any sort of restrictions on what type of German patches could or could not be displayed on the uniforms in those regions?
Well, so for lack of a better term, no. For the most part, if I have to describe it, is of course is all forbidden in Germany.
Yeah.
Right. If you're inside of German land where I was actually living at the time, you cannot have any of this. It was frowned upon. Right. At the same time, if you go to Belgium, it was a free for all. Now, what made it somewhat interesting is that at the same time there was still some impressions like SS and things like that they still have that how can I say, that stigma associated with it. So people actively kind of choose not to portray that.
And we see that here too. Very rarely do you see somebody walk around in a SS uniform. And if you do, even the Germans are like, what the hell is that guy doing?
Yes, exactly. So a lot of it, but what it did, it provided a very rich sense of the German army, because there were people willing to do jobs in the German army that were not necessarily old infantry, like clerics. There were people doing nurses. There were all kinds of other things associated with that. German Air Force and all this other kind of stuff that you don't normally see in the States, right? Because everybody's either infantry or paratrooper, if you're an American, and that's about it, at least from my perspective. Now, so this event goes by, and what made it really cool is, like I said, I've been walking around with this giant piece of metal on wood that looks like a rifle, but it's nothing like a rifle. So, like I said, culturally speaking, there's a lot of nuances that go into representing a German soldier that you just don't learn in America. Like, for example, the Germans from basic training, they're taught if like you're running around with your weapon, you don't hold it like this. You hold it with one hand by the barrel and you kind of run like that. Reason why they did that is so that if somebody watches you run on the horizon and they cannot determine what side are you in, they only see your silhouette. They know by how you're carrying your rifle, because it's so unnatural to do. They know that you're a German soldier, not a Russian or an American or something like that. So immediately after I showed my platoon, I got yelled at because I'm carrying it like an M16 instead of carrying it like even though it's ergonomically set up for that way, they were purposely geared into doing it a certain way. So again, that level of realism you can't buy, in a normal American unit, unless you find people that are knowledgeable. So yeah, so again, we spent 2 or 3 days hopping fences, hiding in plain sight, trying to set up ambushes against certain things. I quickly realized that the tank was not make believe, that it actually existed. Couldn't see it that night because it was dark, but they did have a Panther tank. And watching this line of German soldiers around this farm line Sunday. So again, the Americans come in Saturday, they do the march and they leave. And a lot of times they don't even know that Sunday there was a big battle event that was happening. So that event that actually involves blanks and involves a stational fight, which I could not legally do in Germany because I didn't have the equipment to do that.
Sure.
But the event was organized and ran by the French military magazine, and they actually rented weapons
Nice.
for that, and they actually gave you like a temporary license for you to operate that weapon while you were there. So pretty much unanimously, everybody voted to give the weapon to the American. So I'm walking around with this MP40, full auto, something that I can never get stateside either because it's really expensive unless you will get a V-Fong or all those other different type of weapons. So I got to do a lot of like house-to-house fighting and shooting blanks, at full auto in the Ardennes. We ran behind the tank. So talking about a tank going full blast, and you're basically smelling all that diesel or that German kerosene burning in front of you as you're trying to take an objective. And the way it kind of works out, and most reenactments kind of work this way, right? It's like wrestling, right? The Germans kind of win in the beginning, and then somehow the good guys recover toward the end, and then they fight back. Well, part of what I wasn't expecting, which make the American fight not very realistic, is like everybody in town is wearing an American uniform. People do it for fun. They just go grab a paratrooper tunic and they walk around with it. So when you're like fighting next to all these people that are dressed up as military people, it makes it really confusing to know who you're really fighting and who's the reenactors and who's the general population kind of thing. But really rewarding event. Well, when it was over, I was exhausted. Right, I was out of gas, and interestingly enough, as we're getting ready to do our final push into the town, into Recogne, this guy heard me speaking German, and he walked up to me and he goes, "You have an American accent." And I'm like, "Guilty as charged." And he goes, "Can I take your picture?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, why not?" So I went ahead and got my balaclavas, as quick as I could make it up to cover my face, and I took a random picture from a random dude. The event turned. I found a few videos on YouTube that has me running around, gunning people down with the MP40 and having a good old time. And one of my French compatriots sends me a message that says, "You're famous." And then when I open it, my picture was in the front cover of the French military magazine edition for that Battle of the Bulge event. Now, interestingly enough, is again, half of my face was covered by the balaclava. The other half of it was covered by a front reenactor that they had posted in the picture in front of my picture. So, of course, the natural focus of the eye when you see the cover is to look at that person and not me in the background. And so as I traveled through Europe as a tourist, and this magazine started coming out, I found it everywhere. So, of course, I bought it as quick as I could. So it's not that expensive, but it was a cool thing to say, "Oh, shit, that was me."
That's awesome.
I even had this conversation with a vendor in Spain that he was betting money that I wasn't me. So I actually had to take pictures of the event and show him, and then I won the bet. But anyway, so that kind of started that way, right? And he got me a lot more connections in the local area to meet other reenactors. But again, the flavor of it at my age and all that, Yeah, running around with a rifle, it was cool, that particular setup, but I'm like, I think I'm over this. I think I'm ready for other things and all that. And this is really when my reenacting career kind of took a very interesting turn. And so I got invited to a little event in Belgium that was supposed to be a train ride. Now I participated in certain other events like that in the States. One of them in Florida, they call it Von Kessinger Express.
Yeah.
So like one of the guys in my unit will dress up as a German general, and you jump around in that. And there were certain similar elements to it. Like you would buy a ticket, and that ticket will give you like a fake passport, and with that passport, something were ready to trick German security that, and you could get picked up from the crowd and arrested. What made it interesting, of course, the people that do this are actors that are blended with the crowd.
Yeah, I'm actually taking over that event this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've
Very
done it
cool.
for the last 4 or 5 years. Megan Art just retired, so me and Paul are taking over the Allied side. We're actually just talking about it today. Yeah. So Von Kessinger is still around.
I'm glad to hear that. It was a great event, especially doing it with that train museum. So effectively, on that Von Kissinger Express, I actually, again, I was doing the sniper thing back then. It was kind of frustrating because kind of cool that you get to interact with the people face to face while you're in the train, right? And so I was the lookout, right? And from what I remember, the way how that train ride was going, there was a dialogue that had to happen,
Mm-hmm.
and then everybody was waiting for Von Kessinger to say a particular line, and that's when the battle broke out, right? So we're waiting for that cue to start the fight. And again, I'm standing there as a sniper with the rifle in my chest. I got binoculars, and we make it to this last station that had a bunch of uh, railroad carts around us.
Mm-hmm. The end of
And
the
the
line.
American soldiers that were out there, they were not doing a very good job about hiding themselves.
Yeah.
So they were clear as view. You could see them. And again, I'm supposed to be the watch. And the way how the event was played out, I had a couple of like haystacks, blocks, I guess. I don't know how to call it. I think that's
Bales of
like,
hay.
yeah. So they were all kind of stacked up in there. And I was supposed to fight from the platform as a sniper and then kind of like push those things out and then kind of fall on top of them and take my death that way, right? So again, made it very interesting because I can see them as clear as day. The audience could see them because they were not doing a good job concealing themselves. And there was this particular little kid that I'll never forget. He was like, "Hey, sniper, can you not see the 5 Americans that are behind that particular cart?" Is this? Are you blind, man?
Yeah.
So I had to put the binos and start looking to another direction. Well, waiting for Von Kessinger to say the phrase. He finally did. And again, we were talking earlier about books, right, and reading books. So a lot of times you end up picking up nuances and tactics from stuff that you read in books that most people don't know. So if you know anything about the Carabiner 98 or the K98 German rifle, it holds 5 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that I read in a book is like you put all 5 of them and then you squeeze them down real hard and you take a 6th round, go straight in the chamber. And while you're holding them down, you lock it. You lock the bolt. So what this makes is basically allows you to temporarily hold 6 rounds on the rifle. So when the battle finally kicks off, and I go alarm, 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 and I start all the bells and whistles going, and everybody starts shooting. So my American counterparts decided to come rushing out of the cart one by one, with about a 3 feet spread between each one, right? So I put at the time I had a scout sniper rifle, which basically means I have a long eye relief mount, which just makes it pretty easy to point. And I cap the first one, and he takes the fall. I reload, I take the next one, and before I realize they keep coming one after the other, and they're all lining up directly in my line of sight, which I'm taking them one at a time. So if you guys seen that movie Glorious Bastards, with that scene with I think it was called Sodal, which is that German sniper that is starts stacking up the enemy soldiers, that's kind of how that looked like. So, and again, I keep on engaging the weapon and putting it to work, and then the smart guy was the sergeant. The sergeant had a Tommy gun, and he was counting shots. Right. So he got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he comes out of the cart screaming, "I got you!" with the Tommy gun. And he was really surprised when I pointed that thing at his forehead, and I fired a 6th round. And at that point, he took his Tommy gun, and because of course he traveled to the event to showcase his gun, he wants to shoot it. So he starts spraying, basically randomly while holding the trigger while he takes his fall. And at that point, I realized there's nobody around left to kill me. So I kind of purposely lower my rifle so I don't break it, into the pail of hay, and then I pretend like, oh, he got me, and I take my hit from the train into that predisposed location that was set on the floor. Of course, I bounce into that, and I end up, in the wrong position, which is basically with my head up instead of head down. That's another simple tactic that you get taught, that you always want to land your face down. That way, when it's hot and you're sweating,
Especially
you're not
in Florida.
making eye movements or moving your face so that people know that you're not dead. So anyway, kind of forgot the little fact that this was probably one of the worst parenting decisions that I have made, was to bring my wife and my kids on the train. And my 6-year-old at the time goes, they shot my daddy. So she's going through this complete, like, uh, face of like, they killed my dad. And then people are start to talk to them about, hey, it's okay. He's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. He's pretending he's going to be fine. And another rule of reenacting is when you find somebody laying on their face, you with their face up, so you go up and you pretend you search them a little bit, and then you flip them over so that you can put them out of their misery, right? So they go over and they flip me over, and the American guy was such a nice, friendly guy that he kicked me in the rib cage, like, you dirty German or whatever, and then walked out. And now my daughter was already emotionally recovering from the event. She gets to see that, no, he's really dead. And she went into another, crying outburst in the train.
Yeah, the other thing
But anyway,
we do down here, a lot of times when you have dead people laying around and you got your vent, some of the allies have to stand sentry, and, while the public leaves, or in that particular case, have the guys get on the train. And so what we tell people is, hey, if you're standing there, staying guard, and somebody's face up, stand in a way so that your shadow is covering up their face. You're now the tree for them to, because these guys are laying out, they're going to be laying there for 10, 15 minutes. And so, we try to stand so that we're casting a shadow over their face if they
of course
are laying face
but
up or face
having been
down.
a bone passenger and having seen that exposure, right? Well, like I said, as much as you try to mentally transpose yourself to Europe, no, you're still in Florida. You can't escape that, right? So now I get this invite to this other event that looks the same. It's called Red Wall to Liberty. And it was the same setup, hosted by a museum. You show up when you get on a train, and you go through its little stages. And is designed to bring the crowd in, and is designed to be incremental in the level of hostility that you're facing. So in other words, in the very beginning, the Germans reenactors you're making are all friendly, they're all happy, and you start seeing like this weird vibe that people are not expecting from, something that they associate with their, bad things, for lack of a better term. So I decided to play, and I decided that for whatever reason, I was done being a grunt, and I wanted to represent my own rank and my position in the military. So in this case, I decided to be a German major. So I dress up, find my little buffalo items, and kind of like a mix between fighter pilot and, at the same time, regular officer, fly boots, and a combination of things like that. My Flieger jacket, or my pilot's jacket. And so I show up. Interestingly enough, one of because of the time that I was in Germany, and all this stuff is to the Germans is, for lack of a better term, junk. You can buy a lot of this stuff for really cheap, especially in German eBay and things like that. So one of the things that I bought was a suitcase that basically had the name of a German major called Major Stadelman. So I walk around with my little suitcase because I'm going to go on a train ride. So why not, right? It makes perfect sense to me. In my suitcase, what am I going to carry? Well, I'm going to put a couple of cigars and a couple of like brandy whiskey bottles, right? Why not, right? So, and maybe a couple of shirts in case I have to change and whatnot. So I show up, and little did I know that because of my decision to be the German major, I became the higher ranking person in the whole train. And that is a problem. Mm-hmm. Why is that a problem? Because I don't speak fluent German to fool anybody in Germany that that I'm a German officer, let alone there's the color of my skin and other things that don't quite go along with the impression, but who cares? So I'll figure I'll roll with the punches and see what happens. As luck will have it, another guy shows up, has also a German officer, in this case Air Force as well, and a junior rank to me, so he shows up as a lieutenant. Also, another couple guys show up as German enlisted Air Force dudes that were supposed to be operating this flag gun that they put on top of the train. But while they're not on the flag gun, they're just basic utility persons. So little did I know that in Von Kissinger style, they'll go ahead and put me up on their antique car. They parade me around with the German officer being my executive officer and the two enlisted guys being my assistants. And they're going around, walking around with my suitcase and everything and my trench coat and everything. And kind of like, again, like I have my whole staff, you know. So if I could have planned this thing, it will never come out this way. It just kind of happened to fit perfectly. And of course, I go get in the train, and my German counterpart, he's actually not German. He's from Holland. He's Dutch, and he's also an English teacher. So it makes it perfect because he can communicate with me. So he can relay my instructions, for the event to run and all that. But now I quickly realize that I get in the train, and I am basically in a car surrounded by people that are watching my every move for at least an hour and 15 minutes of this train that is going. So how do you fool these people into like your character, into your persona that you're trying to portray? Well, let's say that I knew enough German to get myself in trouble. Like I could find the restroom, I can order beer, and I could have a yes or no conversation. So that's exactly what we did. So my German counterpart, which is fluent in German, he'll go into his long monologues, right? And then purposely leave each particular sentence at the end of his monologue open-ended that you can answer with yes, no, maybe, perhaps, or later. So he will go blah 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 blah. Stop. Oh, Axo, which means like, oh yeah, and then it's like keep going blah 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 blah, and you go Feelish, which is like really. And we did this for an hour and 50 minutes. We fooled everybody in the train thinking that I was fluent in German, so everybody was buying it. I had no idea what the guy was saying, but we went along with it. In fact, the staff of the event were so moved by the whole personification that they let me open up my brandy bottles and start drinking whiskey or brandy. They let me smoke cigars while on the train. I think it was the most, interesting gentleman conversation that I had no idea what the guy was saying, but it was fun. So, like I said, it goes through certain stages and it keeps getting more and more aggressive or more in your face as you continue. So we get to the next station. Apparently, some of the passengers were supposed to be either French resistance or Allied airmen that were trying to hide, and of course, it ended up with this chase going on the tarmac, and this other guy capturing a British airman. And now this is when the rough guys start to get in the game, right? And they come up to me and they approach me and they ask me for my permission to search the tank. And I go, kind of like carry on, and they go around, they do their thing. They found 2 or 3 more guys, and yeah, to my surprise, they put him up on the side of the railroad tracks, and they started impersonating or representing an execution at that point. And at that point, I'm like, my Lord, what the hell did I get myself into? Because this is starting to get weird and political, and I'm trying to like somewhat distance myself from this event, but now I'm stuck with it. I got to run with it, right? So it keeps on going, and we finally get to the final battle scene. And I managed to stay more or less in character 99% of the time until we were approaching the American lines, and they had hot whistles basically set up in there. And this is when I realized the Belgians are totally not World War II. They actually put explosives on the railroad tracks, right? And they time it so when you get the explosion from the hot whistle, it blows up on the tank with a second later or something to give you the idea that there's traveling and movement. And once that explosion goes up, it feels like the whole train lifts up from the ground and it falls right back in. And of course, I ran out of character and I go, oh shit, that was crazy, in English, not the German persona that I was supposed to be portraying. Interestingly enough, I managed to take a quick break to go to the restroom during the train ride. And I figured there was a battle, and I figured that I had some sort of role to play. So I closed the door in the bathroom, I open up my phone, and I look up Call of Duty commands. If you guys know, the game kind of like was staged and had voice actors going into it. So I was able to find the script of all the German commands that were given during that thing. And I learned a few of them, and then I yelled a couple things during the battle. And of course, eventually the Germans die, and I end up surrendering my Luger, my fake German Luger, basically to the American commander for the, to signify that the event is over. I think when my time was done in Europe, I surrendered the Luger probably 7 times. So, but it was very interesting to go through it. Uh, then I got to the last part of this event, but I got to tell you a little bit more before I get to the last story. So the event was over. I go back to Germany, and I got an appointment for another event in Luxembourg. I go to the event in Luxembourg, really chaotic from my perspective, because I got instructions to go to a place, and this is when you start seeing a little bit of the double standard, right? And you got to understand that it takes a lot of effort and work to actually create this impression, to bring it forward. And of course, people don't value it the same way that they value an American impression. Luxembourg was the first time that they do a World War II event, and over there they actually have laws that somewhat suppress symbology and suppress a lot of this stuff. So a lot of people didn't really know how to do it. So they end up taking the German reenactors and putting them up on a trailer park. While at the same time, the American victors were drinking champagne at the castle. Not talking about riding open white horses and doing all this kind of cool stuff, but yeah, double standard. Fortunately, I had an issue going out there. I blew up a tire. By the time that I fixed it and showed up at the event, I was already late. The event was about to start. And there I am arriving at this trailer park. So I go ahead quickly and change into my gear. And this guy that runs the trailer park quickly realized that I'm part of the group. And he shows up in a golf cart and puts me on the back. So there I am, right into battle with a Panzerfaust, a complete, camel smock setup and everything, a fake dummy, MG MP44, and a golf cart. So
hey man, if they had it, they would use it.
Yeah, I'm sure they would. Right? You got to do what you got to do. Well, we drive around the forest. I mean, it's like way past the road and way past the average stuff in it. And I'm sure you've seen in Europe those on the movies like this train overpasses. They're all kind of covering like all green. It looks like you're in the forest kind of thing. So we turn right into that underneath that underpass, and it's like the complete media outlets of Luxembourg. They are all there, right? And I show up. I get out of my golf cart. I pull my balaclava up and along with the hoodie, and I run off into the woods. So the first woods that I could find, the closest one. And I'm running around, and I start seeing foxholes with Americans on it. And there was a Dutch guy pretending to be American, kind of oxymoron, but he tells me, "Hey Jerry, the front line's over there." so I turn around and then go over and find my German unit that I have signed up with. Interestingly enough, in Luxembourg, it was a different composition because there were ethnic Germans playing around with this. Now, I'm not talking the French guys from Alsace that are French. I'm talking about guys from Switzerland doing it, guys from Germany that travel outside of Germany to go do that. And so the level of realism, it was top notch, right? And of course, I show up and I find what appears to be a lieutenant, and I go to Morgan Helloinen, and he just basically calls Antretten, which is like the full in command, and everybody kind of gets in line, gets formal real quick, and he starts to give the instructions of the battle. And I start saying, "Hey, hinter the Gebäude," which means like behind the building. And I got kind of like a broken idea of what we're doing, but I'm just gonna find somebody and follow them into battle, right? And the event starts, and we start running around, and we like walked into the most stupid, tactically speaking, position you can possibly find, because we get behind this building, like he said, and there's think about a creek that has different levels, right? The water is at one level, But if you're on the west side of the creek, you're a lot higher position compared to on the other side. So you gotta like somehow cross the water and climb up to get to the other side. So there's only one little bridge that basically covers that, right? And he's got two Browning machine guns on each side of the beach, basically protecting it, along with a bunch of other firepower and fire teams in it. So there's no way that you'll be stupid enough to run over the bridge and get blown up. So we found ourselves in this, catch-22 position that there's nothing we can do but die. And again, I'm sitting back in there and I'm starting to get, again, I can't even fire because I got a dummy gun. So I'm screaming like random things left and right just to try to stay engaged in the battle. And I see the lieutenant and I go, Herr Leutnant, which means Sir Lieutenant. And he goes, Ja, was, which means what? And I go, Wir brauchen Feuerschutz, which means we need covering fire. And he looks at me and he goes, Jawohl, which means yes, sir. He turns around and he goes, Feuerschutz, which means covering fire. And again, I got to the event last. I had no idea who was there, what was happening, what the plan was. So next thing I know, all these cannons start blasting from the top of the mountain, right? And all these people come running down, like take over the positions, and the Germans win the day. And I'm standing there like, what happened? How did this come to be? Apparently, when I did my research later, the battle of that particular place in Luxembourg was won by the Germans, and they reenacted it play by play. There was no happy ending to anybody other than the Germans win. And of course, the German media was taking pictures, and the Swiss media and everybody else. So that's important because of later in my career, as I'm getting ready to come home, I get summoned to go see the German general, and they're being pretty cryptic about what's happening. They told me the general wants to see me, so I am with his exec, and we're like literally in the car, just waiting for the German general plane to land. He lands and he comes out, he meets me, he jumps in the car, and he takes me to the dining facility that is in Norway at the time. So it's important to say that it's outside of Germany. And they have set up a nice little table and everything else. And the Germans had a concept that they called the Stammtisch, which basically means like the root table. So if you go to a German restaurant that's like good enough to have a good audience and be well established, there's always like one table that is reserved for the all the important people or the family members of the owner and all that kind of stuff. And usually each spot is marked with the location on the table. So the German lieutenant colonel tells me to sit down over there, and I sit down, and I see my name in the table. And I'm totally confused because I think I know what it means, but I'm not 100% sure. But somehow I made it into the club, right? So the German, again, he's ignoring me. The German general, he's eating. And he goes, Cowboy. And I'm like, yes, sir. He goes, in this events that you go to, I've been told that you do some sort of like, let's call it war games. Is what he calls it. I'm like, oh shit, I'm busted. I go, yes, sir. That's exactly what I do. Oh, and I'm expecting a reprimand and get put on the next airplane and sent back to America. And he goes, well, tell me, this events that you go to, have the Germans ever won? And I go, well, yes. And I told him about the event that I went to in Luxembourg. And when I was done telling this story and I talk about the covering fire and the explosions and all this kind of stuff, before I realized that German table looked like they were watching a football game and they just won the World Cup. I was really confused. So the exec to the general kind of like explained to me a little bit more. And it's basically, if I had to describe it, it's like, because all the politically correctness that is associated with World War II, all this chapter, it's like, imagine that you as a professional soldier, anything from 1939 to 1945, somebody grabs that book and deletes it from ever existing. So you don't know your history, you don't know your battles, you don't know your tactical, victories or what worked, what didn't work. All that stuff is just, it disappeared. It never happened. So I had to go in from America to go kind of like illustrate them to them, some of the battles that happened in there and all that kind of stuff for them to kind of get a bit of a, appreciation for their own country. So that,
Oh,
in my opinion, kind of gave him a little bit of pride, and it was really, really rewarding to be able to partake and do that. Now, little did I know, when I go back to my air base, which, if I had to describe the dynamics, is the most American personnel salutes each other because it's part of our customs and courtesies that you can expect, but nobody else salutes anybody between them. So, like, the Italians don't salute the Germans don't salute the Turkish, nobody else does, right? Usually you recognize people within your own country, kind of thing, in practice, right? So I'm walking down the base, and a random German pops up to attention and goes, Guten Tag, Herr Major. And I go, whoa, where did that come from? So very quickly, my reputation spread within the German side, and they kind of treated me like one of their own. So when I did my going away, this other German lieutenant colonel that was part of the group even gave me basically a pilot's watch, from like an ME-109 pilot watch, as a parting gift, just to give you an idea of the kind of camaraderie that was able to build, with them. Another somewhat of a reenacting story.
Well, if you don't mind, let's get into
Sure.
your new project, your YouTube channel
Sure,
you're starting,
absolutely.
and all that stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. It's getting kind of late, and I just realized I can talk forever. So this also has a little bit of story, so I'm going to try to do the best I can to summarize it real quick. There's a lot of things that had to happen for that to take place. So in 2017 or so, I was the Air Force pilot that was going to fly. At that point, I was flying an E-3 AWACS, and I was flying to fly the E-3 AWACS for the demonstration for the air show. Unfortunately, a big thunderstorm came in. All the airplanes got scattered. So when the air show started, I didn't have an airplane to fly, which, as a pilot, is a pretty big, bump. But I kind of used the opportunity to talk to people, interact with others, and be able to kind of like network, right? So this gentleman approached me. He was in a pretty interesting position because he had landed his airplane for the airbase, and the pilot that he chose to fly there, they did a background check when he landed, and they discovered that he had, I don't want to go into details, but he had done something that could be construed as a federal offense. And the next thing you know, the guy was escorted out of the airbase. So his airplane didn't have a pilot to return it home. So the guy asked me to fly it. I ended up flying the airplane home. We're talking specifically about a Cessna 02A Skymaster. So I fly it back to home base, and he elects to basically use me as his demo pilot from the time on. So I flew that aircraft in several roles and then show it to customers and things like that. Strictly as a hobby. There was no pay or anything like that. It's just something I did for fun. Part of the agreement is that I could take the aircraft and fly whenever I want to for my family or whatever. It's tons of fun. So at the end of it, he asked me to fly it to Nellis Air Force Base for the Nellis Air Show. And I take the Skymaster, I fly across country all the way out there. And where I landed, I got parked right next to a World War II replica airplane that basically had a replica Storch, which is a German observation plane from World War II. So the owner happened to be a Vietnam era veteran. Me showing up with that particular airplane made an instant connection. We kind of became friends from the get-go, and as the event came up to a conclusion, we stayed in touch and decided that he was going to set up a huge World War II event in California. It had to do with a place that it used to be George Air Force Base. So imagine that you have all these houses as a part of base housing. I can't really understand the details, but something along the lines of like tanks crushing houses as part of this reenactment. He wanted to fly on the backseat of his own airplane to be like the German commander calling the shots from the air. He wanted a pilot that he could put on the front, so he asked me to go do it. So I'm like, sure, love to go do that. Unfortunately, life intervened. I got sent to Afghanistan. So I was doing what we call pre-deployment training before that event happened. And so I couldn't go. And somewhere along the lines, he was taking off. He had an issue, and he had an accident. And that's about all I can say. But he was nearly tragic. He luckily survived, right? So I did not know this until pretty recently, that I came across, decided to go search his airplane, and I came across the accident investigation report and all that other stuff. And I reached out and we established communication again. Along the process of doing this, he's sending me a lot of information from his own airplane. And there's a reference on one of the articles that he wrote, because the guy was an expert for that particular airplane in the States. And there's a reference to a project on the bottom part of the article that I happened to ask, hey, what came up with that project? And that particular project was a replica Focke-Wulf 190. The one that was being referenced in the article was a wooden fuselage with some other aspects to it that when I started talking to this person, I quickly realized that it wasn't the same Focke-Wulf that it was listed in the description. He started talking about an old metal fuselage made by this guy that used to design race cars. And again, some really high-end features to this particular airplane that made it very interesting to me. We talked back and forward, and again, without going into too many details at this time, because legally I can't disclose too much. But bottom line is, this person had the airplane. It belonged to a friend of his that had passed away, unfortunately, due to a battle with cancer and some other stuff. So because of his previous accident, he was not in a position to be able to restore it and fly it. And so he passed the torch to me. So interestingly enough, where I'm at right now in my career, I am in a situation where I'm a transitioning military veteran. So I kind of have one foot in the service and the other one is getting ready to go out. So that means that there's some financial transitions that have to happen. That of course is not probably the best time of my life to be able to generate, the income that I would need to be able to restore an airplane. But I felt like this is something that is an opportunity that I couldn't pass, and I'd rather secure it, right? And then basically, after my transition to the civilian sector is done, then I can focus on it. So specifically, we're talking about a 3/4 scale Focke-Wulf 190 replica. Was made somewhere in the 80s, like 1986. Flown a few times. Unfortunately, had bad luck around, and so we were able to go to California, pick it up, and then bring it over here to Texas. And we're currently working the restoration process to get the airplane airborne. So, to my knowledge, and again, I could be wrong, I only know of 3 replica Focke-Wulf 190s that are scale projects built as experimental airplanes. Now, there was a company called Flugwerk that made 1-to-1 scale replicas on it with original German tooling and original German equipment and all this sort of stuff. But those usually cost over 1.5 million bucks for an airplane. So you don't see them around. People buy them, they fly them around a couple of times and put them up in a museum. It's not the constant stuff. There's about 2 original ones one is about to be finished. The other one's already in Seattle, which is I don't know if you know about the one that they crashed in like near Leningrad. They found there in a forest and then they restored it here in the States. So again, these are really unique airplanes that you can't find anywhere. But on that league, let's call it the 3/4 scale replica airplanes. There's 3 of them in the States, and I happen to have one of them as part of my team. So in order to support that transition, I started a YouTube channel called Cowboy's Vintage Wings. Primarily, it has to do with warbirds and aviation. It's a mix of my experiences as an airman. It's got videos of my airplanes that I've flown, sometimes in the Air Force, sometimes in deployment. Also warbirds with the local civilian community that I have to play. There's videos of the Cessna 208. There's videos of the Skymaster. And we're starting a series of documentaries or short little documentaries that are designed to generate interest in World War II warbirds. So I would like to take the opportunity to again hopefully invite the audience to come and support me. At this time, I'm only interested in generating subscribers to generate the support for future projects. Eventually, I would like to get sponsors, because what we're looking to see at this point is a goal, because unfortunately I have to get the aircraft airworthy first, and that is quite a tasking. We need to change the engine, we need to change the landing gear retraction system, and do a full conditional inspection to get the aircraft airborne. Money wise, we're looking, and again, this is just rough spitting numbers. We're looking between 80,000 to 100K just to be able to get everything that we need to be able to do it safely. And of course, that's going to take a lot of effort. And I figured that I started as a community effort to try to get the aircraft going. And then that brings the problem with all those challenges that I talk about being a German reenactor and the stigma sometimes that you carry and all that kind of stuff. It's like, how do you make the people get behind a project like this and support it, right? Kind of hard to go to a German restaurant and be like, hey, would you like to support my World War II German airplane, right? With German markings and all this kind of stuff in it, which is not going to go very well with the representation. So last time I met Jeff, actually not the last time, well, maybe last time. There was a bad day. I think Dennis was there too, portraying a German soldier in bad weather, so airplanes didn't come to his flying, right? And
Right.
maybe Jeff can talk a little bit about it too. They started doing an impromptu scene in which they're dealing with an airman that got shut down, and then he's acting like the German soldier capturing him. So that particular reenacting scene, it was very simple, just hastily made. They made a great job out of it, and it saved the day for the people that show up there to go see a show, right? Because there was nothing else going on. And in the middle of me watching them interact, another pilot that landed there from the Commemorative Air Force, he steps next to me. And, sometimes I believe that, God works through people and somehow they come over and they talk to you about something and it sparks an idea that creates a project. So when this person showed up and talked to me, I'm looking at Jeff and I'm looking at Dennis, and he goes, have you ever heard about Bob Hoover? And I go, yes. And he turns around and leaves. We talk a little bit more later, but if I ask him, probably he will not even remember having the conversation with me, I guarantee you. So what do I mean? So the idea was to try to set up a show, a reenacting show that takes lessons from things like Von Kessinger Express, that basically incorporates the people into the audience, into the crowd, into the participation of the event. So Bob Hoover is a figure that he's well known in the airshore circuit. The guy was a World War II veteran, and he did some amazing things when it came down to his airplane abilities, right? Like he would show up over the airport at 6,000 feet on a civilian, two-engine airplane, and we'll shut down both engines. We'll start doing a complete aerobatic routine on it, and then land and park the aircraft in a spot that he already predetermined with an X. I cannot even do that with the power running, let alone with no power. So again, it's incredible, right? The ability that this guy had. So he was well known for that. However, a lot of people don't know his World War II story, which is really what I'm setting up to go tell. So the story that he came up with, he was shut down in 1943 and became a POW. Now, April 1945, the Russians are literally at the gates. They're about to liberate the POW camp that he's in. We're talking about almost a week is all he's got left in captivity. If he just keeps his head down and stays out of trouble, he should be able to make it. But that was not good enough for him. So he did something pretty heroic in which he organized an escape out of the camp with some other POWs. And ultimately, 3 of them managed to jump the fence, taking advantage of the low guards that were available, and takes off into the woods, right? So Bob Hoover, instead of doing what we were told to do, which is to avoid contact with everybody and then go hide in a hole until it's over, he manages to sneak up into a German airbase, and he basically forces, along with his buddy, they had met previously a civilian person that gave him a pistol, and they force a German mechanic to help him start the engine, and he escapes to freedom on board a Focke-Wulf 190. So the idea of this reenactment event, and where it comes together with the air show, is to try to stage up on, imagine that you have a crowd of people, and in the middle of that crowd, you start seeing some American POWs are escorted by guys dressed up as German soldiers, right? And eventually there's a distraction, maybe 2 prisoners start a fight, and in the middle of this commotion, 2 prisoners escape into the crowd. and they start blending themselves into everybody else that is happening, right? So now it's kind of hard to set up an inertial environment because there's a lot of stuff going on. But the air show has pauses in which people are getting ready to take off, people are ready to land, which usually the narrators use those breaks to do announcements and advertising and things like that. And the idea is to take advantage of those breaks in which you can set up this in different acts as it goes along. So the first act would be that escape from the POW column. Then the next act would be some American POWs escaping into the crowd and the Germans trying to weed through the crowd to try to find them, right? And then that puts the audience in a position that they get to make a choice about whether or not they want to help or they want to send the Germans to the American POW, or basically have a basic level of interaction through that, right? Ultimately ending up with a fake stage stealing the aircraft scene and taking off, and then basically staging a mock dogfight with, let's say, an aircraft like a Jack 52. That way you bring the Russians also into the mix, do some sort of a small aerobatic routine where Mr. Bob Hoover does his amazing flying skill, gets to escape the contact, and then basically land the aircraft back in the airbase, pop the cowling, and have Old Glory, good old American flag sticking out of it, victorious. In a way to represent the triumph of the American spirit, that indomitable valor and courage that our U.S. American airmen had in World War II, over basically overcoming amazing odds that were against him. So as soon as Bob Hoover took off, he realized that as a pilot he was in a world of hurt because he didn't have a parachute, he didn't have the ability to radio anybody where he was, and the fact that he made it to the American lines and crossed them without having a P-51 Mustang, having him for breakfast, was extremely lucky. So again, really some high-end incredible odds that he went through. So if we can manage to combine that, tell his story, generate public support, and then be able to advance the spirit of American valor in combat, and then kind of tell his story, I think will be a really amazing goal we're pursuing. So it's something that I'm trying to set up as a retirement project when I'm completely out of the Air Force, and maybe even in the future start generating partners to be able to support it. So I do really wholeheartedly appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and then tell the story about it. And I look forward to continuing interactions with your team. It's really been a pleasure, and I'm really excited for what the future holds. And I know that if we can combine our intellects and combine our spirit, we can actually make that happen, and not only make that airplane fly, but also be able to tell his story.
And if you guys want to help Cowboy achieve his objective, primarily start off by getting subscribers on YouTube and viewing his content and getting the word out, head over to youtube.com, look for Cowboy's Vintage Wings. And as always, you can head over to WTSP-worldwar2.com, click on the link on the homepage for this episode. You can find all the links, contact information, and everything else for Cowboy. Cowboy, other than YouTube, do you have a social media area you want people to go track you down? Facebook, Instagram?
Yeah, I could be fun on Facebook. It has Gerald Caballero. That's more of a personal, account, but I'm always willing to, take in friends and stuff like that, especially because I casually use it sometimes to advertise it. Eventually, we'll be moving the platform over to Instagram, and also probably starting a Patreon in the future, maybe even a GoFundMe. But for now, again, we're just kind of building the network slowly to start making the connections. And as I transition out of the military, then I'll be fully engaged into expanding that presence. But again, I appreciate the opportunity big time.
Well, congratulations on your time served in the Air Force, and
thank you so much for your support.
The very cool opportunities you had to do reenacting overseas, and good luck on your project on both your YouTube, the restoring of the plane, and the idea in getting that reenactment off the ground. It's very seldom that you see a living history event that actually incorporates actively flying planes. It's one thing to have some guys in the field have a plane fly over, pretend to do a strafing run, but to do what you're planning on doing sounds like it's going to be a pretty cool event if you can get it off the ground. No pun intended.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the support.
Thank you guys, and for myself, Dennis Blocker, Jeff Copsetta, and Cowboy, we want to thank each and every one of you for hanging out with us tonight, and join us next week. We got a whole list of guests coming down the pike, and we're very excited with what's going on. Thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you all next week. And we're out.
This has been a Digital 410 production.